For more on the Mexican elections, we are joined now by Juan David Rojas. He is a columnist at Compact. He was also in Mexico covering this on the ground. Juan David, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Big fan of the show.
Oh, absolutely. I read your work all the time, Juan David, and I want to ask you, you wrote a great piece on this for Compact. Let's put E1 up on the screen. Mexico's political revolution. You sort of broke down the economic nationalism that Claudia Sheinbaum will likely continue from AMLO. Obviously, they have been very close. Fascinating dynamic between nationalism and populism in Mexico right now, whether it's AMLO or Sheinbaum. Tell us first a little bit about what you saw when you were covering the election down in Mexico the last week.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a stunning victory. I haven't seen anything like it for an incumbent leftist populist government. I mean, it's by far the most successful left government I've seen in 10 years, I'd say, probably.
And tell us a little bit more about why, because Ryan and I were just talking earlier. I think a lot of folks probably misunderstand exactly what it is that attracts so many voters to AMLO and to Sheinbaum and their party. What have they done? Especially, people look at the top line economic numbers out of Mexico and maybe don't realize what that means for an average Mexican who went to the polls on Sunday.
So for decades, GDP growth in Mexico has been really stagnant at around 1% to 2%, and that hasn't really changed in recent years because of nearshoring. It's gotten better. But what changed under AMLO is that wages really started to improve. The government every year gave these huge increases, around 20% to the minimum wage. They also banned subcontracting, which is a way to avoid paying workers benefits, which is actually insane in Mexico when you consider the fact that only around half of the population has formal work. Informality is extremely high. And the results that we can see is that during the course of the 6-year term, wages have gone up 35%, so much so that even informal workers, wages have risen. At the same time, the president is a really idiosyncratic figure. He's seen as also sharing the values of ordinary Mexicans. He's a leftist, but in a lot of ways, he's very traditionalist and socially conservative. People not only see that their lives have improved, this is someone looking out for them, but also shares their values.
And so, Juan David, for decades, Mexico was a one-party state. And elites here in the United States seem to have absolutely no problem with the PRI, just running Mexico, top to bottom. Wages famously were extremely low. Now you have wages growing, and you have a lot of the kind of the Atlantic and other kind of elite institutions here in the United States panicking and saying, oh no, now we're not going to have democracy anymore. It's a one-party state. She won by too much. She's too popular. So, but the only difference, it's actually much more competitive today than it was under one-party PRI rule.
Absolutely.
Seems to be wage growth. Is it wage growth in Mexico that actually has people so upset here in the United States?
Very possibly. There's this great graph that I've referred to that you look at the minimum wage over time in Mexico. In the 70s, Mexico was a pretty prosperous country off of the oil boom, and following the debt crisis in the 80s and the 90s, there's this deliberate decision to suppress wages and stop raising the minimum wage. Well, you have to figure this is also around the 90s, they enacted NAFTA. It makes a lot of sense. You want those low wages because you're stealing all of the industry from the U.S., all that manufacturing industry. Sheinbaum won with around 60% of the vote. It's an incredible victory. They won, the Morena party won 7 out of 9 governorships, and Sheinbaum won in all but one state. You're going to hear the words democratic and backsliding in a lot in the next few months. Why? It's really interesting. The next Congress actually starts 1 month before Obrador leaves office. And so the markets are going insane. The peso dropped around 6% because they're really scared that they're going to be able to pass all these constitutional reforms that they promised that were previously seen as just these unrealistic campaign proposals.
What kind of stuff? What are we likely to see in this month of September where, he's still in office, but they'll have close to a supermajority? I guess they'll have a supermajority in the lower chamber, and then in the upper chamber, they'll have to like pick off a few PRI people to get a supermajority.
Yeah. That really are just clientelists. They have no ideology. All they care about is money. They're 4 seats short in the Senate, but in the Chamber of Deputies, they have a supermajority. So it's actually pretty realistic they could pass some of these reforms. Some of them are pretty benign. One that I love to refer to is that they want to constitutionally ban vaping, which is something that libertarians really would hate. On the other hand, the most controversial one I would say is they want to directly elect judges, including Supreme Court judges. And I'll be honest, I have different feelings about it. It doesn't terrify me, but sure, I guess it could lead to more politicization in the long run. I mean, for a lot of American progressives, I'm sure they'd see that and think, oh, wow, that would be incredible. But what else? They want to make it a constitutional amendment to the minimum wage has to always be raised more than inflation.
Yeah, and they want to like put some of the cash transfers right into the Constitution or something, right?
Yeah, a lot of that. Basically codifying a lot of the laws that we're seeing during the past 6 years.
So let's talk a little bit about, we can put this next element up on the screen, the violence that surrounded this cycle in Mexico. And again, Juan David was just there. So woman mayor shot dead in Mexico day after Claudia Sheinbaum's historic presidential win. That's from CBS News. There were over 30 by some counts assassinations over the course just of this cycle. But Juan David, one of the things your reporting makes very clear is that violence in Mexico, while serious, is also concentrated and isolated, basically in different parts of the country. So if you're in Yucatan, it's one thing. If you're, in Tamaulipas, it's another thing. Can you talk to us just a little bit about that, and also in the context of, you and I talked actually on a podcast last week about allegations of AMLO's.
You should check it out.
Yeah, AMLO's relationship with Sinaloa, the allegations surrounding AMLO's relationship with Sinaloa. Obviously, Sheinbaum doesn't come in with any of that baggage necessarily, other than her affiliation with AMLO. So maybe you could break down just a little bit about what's going on with organized crime in this cycle and beyond.
So Mexico is a gigantic country. It has a population of 110, 120 million. The 30-odd states, so there's a lot of variety. I was only in Mexico City, and I was actually surprised. I've been to a lot of Latin American countries and Latin American cities. Mexico City I found to be extraordinarily safe. You see a lot of people with their cell phones out. There's a ton of tourists, and a lot of the countries like that. Obviously, there are loads and loads of tourists from all over the world, especially from the U.S., that visit different states. Obviously, it's not all Afghanistan, but there are states that are extraordinarily violent. You see incredible rates of kidnappings, cartel attacks and stuff like that. The data's mixed, and there's a lot of scrutiny over it. The government says one thing, critics say another. You could do this with just about any country, honestly. But at minimum, we can definitely say that a lot of places within Mexico are very dangerous, but others less so. There's a lot of variety. As for the allegations against Lopez Obrador, I refer to them as Obrador's Russiagate. Why? They're plausible, but you could say the same thing about Russiagate. Is it possible that the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians? Sure, it's believable, but there was just no concrete proof. Same thing in the case of AMLO. But a lot of Mexican presidents and Latin American presidents have had dirty dealings with cartels, but there's just no concrete proof. The allegations that came from ProPublica and the New York Times had no solid evidence behind them, so much so that an ex-DEA agent came out and said it was probably just a hit piece because the agency hates AMLO's guts. And so in some senses with good reason, because his security policy is very controversial.
Sure. And does Sheinbaum then come to the table with any of that baggage when you have United States media reporting in that way? What does that mean for her, basically?
She'll definitely have that baggage. I mean, I haven't seen anything that ties her to the allegations. And because she was mayor of Mexico City, the big cartels don't have as much of a presence there. She should be fine. Who knows? It'll really depend, I'd say, on whether she continues the similar, more lax approach that has been criticized of the current administration. and we'd probably see more scrutiny then.
Yeah. And Wanda, she's also famously a climate scientist. Mexico City is said to run out of water. I believe June 26th is supposed to be the day that, if it doesn't rain between now and then, that the horrific drought that we've been seeing combined with the heat dome that Mexico's been suffering under the last couple of weeks. Literally, we're talking about running out of water in major parts of Mexico City, not the richest parts, apparently, but what does that mean? Mexico City is going to run out of water, and it seems like Mexico has the best person they could possibly have for the job, the former mayor of Mexico City, who's a climate scientist now elevated to the highest office, but that's still not going to make it rain. Like, what is Mexico City going to do?
Oh, not really sure. Yeah, while I was there was this huge heat wave all around the country, and Mexico City is actually way above sea level, about 2,000 odd meters above sea level, and it was very, very hot. They said that was very unusual. I'd read, just glossed over, that there had been some measures taken around the country, but I'll be completely honest, I was distracted by other things. As far as Sheinbaum's concerned, she served on a UN climate panel. She studied physics and energy engineering. She's made climate change a banner of her campaign, which is actually very different from the current administration, which has been criticized for not taking as much action. There's been some expansion, the solar panels and stuff like that, but AMLO's a real pro-oil guy. So.
Well, yeah. Oh, go ahead, Rin.
No, yeah. I mean, currently, I think most of Mexico's water is used to make produce that is then shipped up to us, and we thank Mexico for that.
There's always this big back and forth between Texas and I think it's the state of Chihuahua or Nuevo León. That they're always haggling over the water in that area, which is, we're seeing like over 100-degree temperatures in the northern states.
And it raises this like super fascinating question about the divides between AMLO and Sheinbaum, because AMLO, for example, has had things to say about the feminist movement that aren't easily categorized in one way or the other. Sheinbaum, on the other hand, as you mentioned, served on like a UN climate panel, has been heralded, not because she's pushed it, but as a sort of feminist champion, a champion of women's values. I think she changed the uniform policy, I think, for schools in Mexico City, right? So that boys could wear one thing, girls could wear another thing, and has made kind of overtures towards cultural progressivism in a way that AMLO never did. So what are some of those differences, and how do you expect Sheinbaum, who hasn't made an effort to like really highlight them over the course of the campaign, at least from my interpretation of how it went, how do you expect those to continue going forward?
That's a spot-on analysis. I mean, during the campaign, she basically just stood as close to AMLO as you possibly could, refused to criticize him. She noted some differences. That she wanted to invest a lot more in renewable energy. She wants a more state-led approach, wants Pemex to transition towards extracting lithium. AMLO also created a state-owned lithium company, but she wants there to be a role for the private sector, but definitely wants a greater focus on renewables. And she's obviously much more conventionally progressive. I have a bullish case and a more pessimistic case as to the course she could take. We really won't know what happens until she takes office in October. If she sticks, I think no matter what, she will govern more like a conventional progressive. And I think that will kind of cause a dormant or hibernating hard right in Mexico, which really remarkably doesn't exist. And I think you could chalk it up just to the current president. Their hard right will probably be a lot stronger in the midterms or in 2030. But so long as she keeps to the economic nationalism, the bread and butter issues, the stuff that really have changed people's lives, it's great because you talk to middle class people here in the US or in Mexico City, and they just hate this guy's guts. They think he's this demagogue, a charlatan who has fooled the people. They can't possibly. You should watch. Mexican media is incredible. There was this one famous commenter saying that they didn't recognize all the things we did for them. We took away their chains when we gave them back democracy. and now they're ungrateful. Well,
we let them vote, and now they're voting for the wrong people. How dare they?
Exactly. It's really hilarious. But so long as they stick to those things, I think that Sheinbaum should be successful. On the other hand, if she abandons the nationalism, the Mexican left has a really hardcore protectionist, patriotic tradition. And if they stick to those things, I think that normal people will still see the government as really speaking for them.
And Sheinbaum's parents actually were Jewish migrants to Mexico. They're from Lithuania and Bulgaria, I believe. Just like a really fascinating story. I have one more question for you, Juan David, is how do we expect Sheinbaum's relationship with the Biden administration to proceed? Similar to AMLO, I mean, we don't really know exactly what the Biden administration has worked out with AMLO when it comes to border crossings. We know that there's been a crackdown after there were meetings. I think this was back in January. So what can we expect from Sheinbaum?
Hopefully, well, I guess depending on your point of view, continuity could be good or bad. It's been, famously, Trump and Lopez Obrador had this bizarrely good relationship. I wrote a whole piece about this called the AMLO-Trump romance in March. And on a personal level, but even on policy, Trump and AMLO have a lot of similarities. They both hate the media. They're both protectionists. They're more traditionalists. I mean, you can question Trump's sincerity, I guess, maybe Lopez Obrador's too. But they supposedly got along from the moment they met, and they were really transactional figures. They had what a lot of analysts have described as this informal deal that the U.S. wouldn't meddle in Mexican affairs, would respect its security and energy priorities as well. And in exchange, Mexico would agree to clamp down on migration. And to a lot of observers from both governments, that was extremely successful. Under Biden, it's actually been more checkered. And so on immigration, well, the Biden administration has had its policy, and that's also altered things in Mexico City. Last year, as Emily mentioned, there's been this huge crackdown that's really driven down border crossings. I think that the current government wants to be seen as not favoring one side or the other. As far as Sheinbaum's concerned, one really good sign of pragmatism is just one thing. As I said, who knows, we'll have to wait till she gets sworn in. One of her closest advisors, Ramon de la Fuente, who was, I believe, Mexico's ambassador to the UN, openly criticized U.S. asylum policy, said it was an impediment to be able to bring down border crossings. I think that's a good sign of pragmatism on part of the administration. Interestingly, I'm not going to name names, but a friend of mine informed me that another, actually an advisor I mentioned in the piece, Diana, an advisor in the piece attended a event that the Heritage Foundation did in Mexico. So I think that any sort of signs of pragmatism, goodwill to work with people that you might disagree with is a good sign from the incoming administration.
And before I let you go, I wanted to get you to comment on one of the funniest things I've seen in a very long time. And so the night that she was elected, Todd Richman, who is the chair of Democratic Majority for Israel, which is an AIPAC spinoff, said that, because she's been so critical of Israel, that it's not really fair to really even highlight the fact that she's the first Jewish president of Mexico. And
Doesn't count.
And he pointed out that she even thanked Jesus in her victory speech. Turns out her husband is Jesus. And she was thanking her husband. So it was apparently news to Americans that there are people named Jesus that live in Mexico. So A, can you confirm that there are people in Mexico named Jesus? And B, what does it say about this kind of AIPAC pro-Israel reaction to her historic election?
I mean, it makes sense. She has taken the same line as her mentor on Israel-Palestine, which actually they've embraced a kind of neutrality. I think they want to play a mediator role, but they've been very strongly in favor of peace. As far as the Jewish component is, the reality is that Sheinbaum is more just ethnically Jewish. She hasn't played up her identity and does not really practice. I think she may be an atheist. And has played up a lot of her just Mexicanness, wearing traditional dress, etc. Her husband is in fact named Jesus. It's a common name in Latin America, but she's had a lot of videos about it, and maybe it could have fooled a lot of people. But the opposition candidate Xochitl Gálvez, towards the end, actually started playing up her religiosity. Who knows how authentic that was, to try to draw a contrast with Sheinbaum. And for instance, former President Vicente Fox, the Coca-Cola executive, made some borderline or openly anti-Semitic slurs against Sheinbaum, noting that she wasn't a real Mexican and the only authentic Mexican in the race was the opposition's candidate.
Well, Juan David Rojas, columnist at Compact, thanks for your reporting and for sharing with us some of what you saw down in Mexico City last week. Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Breaking Points.
If you want to see the rest of Counterpoints, go to breakingpoints.com to become a premium member and get the full uncut show every morning in your inbox and on Spotify.